You know what's funny? The moment you finally start moving forward, the phone buzzes. That text shows up. That call you weren't expecting comes through. And now your heart races, your mind spins, and you ask yourself, what do I do? What do I say? Let me tell you something. Your response in this moment is more powerful than his silence ever was. And if you handle it right, you don't just protect your peace, you shift the balance of control back where it belongs with you. You know, the very first thing that needs to happen when he finally reaches out after silence. You pause. I know that sounds simple, maybe even too simple, but it's not. That pause is powerful because when that message hits your phone or when his name flashes across your screen, there's a rush that happens. Your heart skips, your stomach flips, your mind starts racing, and in that moment you are not thinking clearly, you're reacting. And if you react right away, you risk handing over all the control he just tried to take back with one message. That pause is where you protect yourself. That pause is where you reclaim your composure. Here's the truth: silence creates tension. His silence may have left you confused, frustrated, or hurt. And when someone finally breaks that silence, there's this instinct to jump in, to prove something, to demand answers, or maybe even to show them that you're fine without them. But that's all emotion talking. That's not wisdom, that's not self-respect, and that's not strength. The pause is you saying, I don't respond out of impulse. I respond out of choice. Think about it. How many times have you sent a text too fast or said something you wish you could take back just because you felt pressured to answer immediately? That's what happens when you let emotion drive the wheel. But the person who can pause, even for a moment, shows discipline. And discipline in relationships speaks louder than any quick reply. It says, I am not at the mercy of your timing. I live on mine. That pause doesn't mean you're ignoring forever. It doesn't mean you're playing games. It means you're choosing clarity over chaos. It's giving yourself a second to ask the right questions before you give him an answer. Why is he reaching out now? How do I want to feel after I respond? What version of me do I want to show up in this conversation? Those questions don't get asked when you're typing back in 3 seconds flat. They only get asked when you allow that silence to work for you, not against you. And here's something else about the pause. It communicates without you saying a word. When someone knows they don't get immediate access to your emotions, they notice. They realize that their actions don't just slide in without consequence. That pause makes them sit in their own silence for a while, the same silence they once gave you. And maybe, just maybe, it makes them think twice about how they approach you the next time. It's also about your dignity. Because let's be real, when you answer instantly, it can look like you were waiting by the phone. And you weren't. You were living your life. The pause is proof of that. It shows you value your own rhythm, your own peace, and your own presence more than you value rushing to someone who didn't rush for you. That doesn't mean you play cold. It doesn't mean you drag it out just to hurt them. It means you stand tall enough to say, I get to choose when and how I engage. The most attractive thing you can show someone is that you're steady, that you don't get pulled into every emotional storm, that you can hold yourself even when they try to shake you. The pause is your anchor. It's what separates a reaction from a response, and a moment of weakness from a moment of strength. And if you can master that, if you can pause before you speak, pause before you type, pause before you step back into that conversation, you shift the entire dynamic in your favor. Because when he reaches out after silence, your first response isn't words, it's patience. And that patience will say more than any text ever could. When he finally decides to reach out after silence, the second thing you need to do is step back and recognize why he's reaching out. Because I promise you, it's not random. People don't just go quiet, disappear, and then suddenly come back without a reason. There's always something behind that move, and if you don't stop to think about the why, you can get swept up in the what. The text, the call, the message. It becomes the distraction. But if you can look past the words and see the motive, you'll handle it with a lot more clarity. Sometimes he's reaching out because he feels guilty. Maybe the silence got heavy. Maybe he knows he left you hanging, and now his conscience is poking at him. So he sends that, "Hey, how have you been?" Not because he's deeply invested, but because he wants to ease his own guilt. That's not about you. That's about him trying to make himself feel lighter. Recognizing that motive helps you see the difference between genuine care and self-serving comfort. Other times it's curiosity. He wonders if you've moved on, if you still think about him, if you'd still answer. That little ping on your phone is him testing the waters. He doesn't necessarily want to swim, he just wants to know if the water's still warm. And if you confuse curiosity with commitment, you'll give way too much weight to a message that wasn't meant to carry it. And then there are the ones who reach out because they're lonely, not because they miss you, but because in that moment you represent familiarity. You represent comfort. Maybe their other options faded. Maybe the silence of their own life got too loud, and suddenly they remember you. But here's the truth. Loneliness is a terrible foundation for reconnection. If you don't recognize that, you might mistake a temporary need for lasting change. And of course, sometimes it's about testing control. People disappear and reappear to see if they still have access to you. It's like knocking on a door just to check if it's still unlocked. They may not want to come inside, but they want to know if they could. And if you open that door too quickly, you confirm that their silence didn't cost them anything. That's why recognizing motive is so important. It tells you if this person is reaching out to give or just to take. But here's the part that matters most. When you take the time to understand why, you put the power back in your hands. Instead of being swept up in the emotion of, "Finally, he texted," you can calmly say, "All right, I see what this is." And from there, you decide how to respond. You're not reacting blindly. You're responding with awareness. And awareness changes everything. This doesn't mean you overanalyze every single word he sends. It means you don't let the surface distract you from the truth. His timing, his tone, the history of his silence. They all tell a story if you're willing to read it. And once you know the story, you can decide if you even want to be part of the next chapter. Because here's the thing, his message might look like the beginning of something, but in reality, it might just be the echo of what already ended. And if you can recognize that, you won't hand over your piece to a text that wasn't meant to protect it. So when he reaches out after silence, don't just look at what he said. Ask yourself why he said it, because the reason behind his words will always matter more than the words themselves. When the moment finally comes and you decide to respond, one of the most powerful things you can do is keep your response short and neutral. I know that urge you might feel, the urge to explain, to unload everything you carried during the silence, to finally get your side out there, and that's normal. You've probably had conversations in your own head 100 times, thinking of what you'd say if he ever showed back up. But when that opportunity presents itself, the strongest move isn't to give him paragraphs. The strongest move is to keep it calm, simple, and neutral. Because here's the reality, when someone goes silent and then reappears, there's often an expectation. They expect you to either be overly excited or overly emotional. They expect fireworks, either in the form of joy or in the form of frustration. What they don't expect is a steady, balanced response that doesn't reveal too much. And that's why short and neutral works. It takes away the drama. It shows him that your life doesn't revolve around his silence, and it places you in control of the tone of the conversation. Think about the difference. If you respond with paragraphs, you're giving away energy he hasn't earned. You're proving that his absence affected you more than his presence ever did. And whether you mean to or not, that tells him you're still deeply invested, even if he wasn't. But when you reply with something short, measured, balanced, you show him that you're not falling into the trap of over-explaining yourself. You don't owe him a diary entry. You don't owe him the weight of your silence. You owe yourself peace, and sometimes peace looks like 3 words instead of 30 sentences. Neutrality is also key here, because neutrality is strength disguised as calm. If you come off too excited, he knows he still has your full attention. If you come off too angry, he knows he still has your full attention. Either way, he wins because your emotions are tied to him. But a neutral response, that leaves him guessing. That shows him you're steady. That communicates, without spelling it out, that your happiness isn't hinging on his decision to show up today. Now, keeping it short and neutral doesn't mean being cold or rude. It means being clear and steady. It's a way of saying, I acknowledge you, but I don't over-invest in you. And that balance is attractive. It makes people respect you because it signals you respect yourself. It says, I don't need to go overboard to prove anything. I know my worth, and I'll respond in a way that reflects that. There's also a hidden advantage in keeping your response simple. It gives you time. A short, neutral answer doesn't lock you into a long conversation you're not ready for. It doesn't open the floodgates. It leaves room for you to observe what he does next, because his follow-up is often more telling than his initial message. Does he try harder? Does he disappear again? Does he get frustrated that you didn't pour yourself out? That reaction will show you more about where he's really at than any first message ever could. So instead of trying to win the moment with the perfect emotional reply, win the moment with self-control. Win it with steadiness. Because anyone can fire back words in a rush of emotion, but it takes strength to stay calm, measured, and clear. And the truth is, the person who controls the tone of the conversation controls the conversation itself. So when he reaches out after silence, don't give him all of your emotions at once. Don't let him know he still owns that space in your head. Keep it short. Keep it neutral. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is almost nothing at all. When he comes back after silence and sends that first message, there's this natural temptation to overcompensate. You want to either make up for lost time, prove you're fine without him, or sometimes even pull him back in by showing warmth he hasn't earned. But this is where a lot of people lose their balance. They give too much energy when the other person is giving very little, and suddenly the scales tip in his favor. That's why it's so important to match the energy he's giving you without over-investing. Because matching energy keeps you grounded, and it keeps the dynamic fair. Think about it this way: if his text is 2 words, hey you, and you respond with 5 paragraphs, who just gave away the most power? He did the least, you did the most, and now he knows exactly where you stand. But if his message is short and your reply mirrors that same level, it communicates something without you having to say it directly. It says, I'm not giving more effort than you're giving me. That's not bitterness, that's self-respect. It's about showing up at the same level, not doing all the heavy lifting for someone who disappeared in the first place. Now, does that mean you have to play games? No. Matching energy isn't about pretending you don't care. It's not about being cold or calculating. It's about being wise with your effort. It's about showing that you can be open, but you're not reckless with your time, attention, or emotions. If he's taking baby steps, you don't need to run. If he's vague, you don't need to be detailed. If he's testing the water, you don't need to dive in headfirst. You're not punishing him. You're simply reflecting what he's giving you. And here's the power in that: when you match energy, you actually create space for him to reveal his true intentions. Because if he's serious about reconnecting, he won't stay at bare minimum. He'll notice that you're not overdoing it, and that will either push him to step up or back out. Either way, you get clarity without having to chase it. And if he doesn't step up, then you've lost nothing. You didn't overextend yourself. You didn't pour your heart out to someone who didn't earn it. You stayed measured and you stayed steady. It's also important to realize that when you match energy, you're training people how to engage with you. You're setting the tone. You're teaching them that they don't get to come back after silence and expect the red carpet rolled out. Respect is built when you hold people accountable to their effort. If they give little, they get little. If they give more, you're open to that. But the balance always remains. And that's what keeps you from falling into a cycle of giving too much while receiving too little. Sometimes matching energy means leaving the ball in their court. You respond politely, calmly, but you don't chase. You let them show you if they're willing to follow through or if it was just a moment of curiosity. And that's where a lot of strength lies, because the hardest thing to do is resist the urge to give when you care. But if you can hold that line, you protect your worth and you make it clear that their silence cost them something. So when he finally breaks the silence, don't feel pressure to carry the whole conversation or fill in the gaps of time he created. Keep it balanced. Keep it even. Because the one who matches energy without investing is the one who never loses control. When someone who's been silent finally decides to reach out, it's not just about what you say back, it's about what your response communicates beneath the surface. This is where boundaries come into play. And here's the thing. Boundaries don't always have to be loud. They don't always have to be spelled out word for word. The way you respond, the tone you choose, the timing you allow, the kind of access you grant, all of that sends a message. Those are subtle boundaries, and they are some of the most powerful ones you can set, because when someone disappears on you and then returns, what they're really doing is testing whether the door is still wide open. And you have to decide, is it? Or does that door now have a lock, a chain, or at the very least, a little more weight behind it before it swings open again? Your boundaries answer that question without you ever needing to announce them. For example, if he sends a message late at night and you used to reply instantly, but now you wait until the next day, that's a boundary. It's you saying, you don't get immediate access anymore. If he comes back with vague words and you choose to respond with calm clarity instead of chasing for meaning, that's a boundary. It's you saying, I don't play in the gray area. If he tries to pull you back into old patterns and you choose not to engage the same way you once did, that's a boundary. It's you teaching him that your silence wasn't wasted time, it was growth. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They're doors that teach people how to come in. And after someone has gone silent, the way they re-enter says a lot about what they deserve. But what you allow teaches them even more. If you act like nothing happened, they learn that silence comes free of cost. If you adjust how you respond, they learn that your time, your peace, and your attention are valuable, and that they have to be respected if they want continued access. Now, a lot of people hesitate with boundaries because they think it looks cold or it feels like punishment. But it's not punishment, it's protection. It's protecting yourself from falling back into cycles where you give too much and receive too little. It's protecting your heart from being handled carelessly. It's protecting your peace from someone who hasn't proven they know how to treat it well. And that protection doesn't have to sound like a lecture. It can be as simple as not matching urgency, not over-explaining, not entertaining half-hearted effort. And here's the beauty of subtle boundaries. They're consistent, and consistency builds respect. He may not even notice them at first, but over time, he will feel the difference. He will see that the way you interact now is not the same as it was before. And that realization will do more than any long speech could ever do. Because people don't respect what's easy, they respect what's steady. So when he reaches out after silence, remember this, your words matter, but your boundaries matter even more. How you allow him to enter your space says everything about how much you've grown in his absence. And if you hold those lines with quiet strength, you'll never have to force someone to respect you. They'll learn to, or they'll lose the privilege of access altogether. When he finally decides to break the silence, the last and maybe the most important thing you have to ask yourself is this: does he even deserve continued access to you? Because not every message requires a response. Not every call deserves a call back, and not every person who leaves gets the right to come back. This is where you step into the deepest level of self-respect, where you recognize that your peace has value, your time has value, and not everyone has earned the right to share it with you again. See, silence does something interesting. At first, it can feel painful, confusing, even insulting. But over time, silence teaches you something. It gives you space to rediscover yourself, to rebuild routines, to find peace without all the noise. And when someone reappears, you have to honestly ask, is letting them back in worth losing that peace? Because sometimes what you thought you were missing is actually what freed you. Too often, people mistake availability for kindness. They think being open every time someone returns shows love, shows forgiveness, shows maturity. But let's be honest, sometimes that availability is just self-betrayal disguised as compassion. Because if someone can come and go as they please, if they can walk in and out of your life without consequence, then what you're teaching them is that your presence has no price. And anything that comes without cost is easily taken for granted. This is why deciding who deserves access is so critical. You have to measure the weight of their return. Are they coming back with real change, with real consistency, with real effort? Or are they just circling back because they know you'll answer? Are they showing signs of growth? Or are they just repeating the same cycle that left you hurt in the first place? You don't have to be harsh to be wise, but you do have to be honest with yourself about the difference between temporary attention and lasting commitment. And here's where it gets tough, because the heart always wants to believe in potential. It wants to say, maybe this time it'll be different. But the truth is, people don't change in silence, they change in action. Words are easy, intentions are easy, but sustained effort, that's rare. And if he's not bringing effort to the table, then his return is just another distraction. You don't have to accept that, and you don't have to apologize for shutting the door to it. Think about it this way. Every time you allow someone back in, you're investing your most valuable resources, your time, your energy, your emotions. And if those resources keep getting drained without return, you're bankrupting yourself for someone who was never willing to invest in you. That's not love. That's imbalance. And the only way to break that cycle is to decide, with strength and clarity, that not everyone who reaches out deserves a way back in. You're not required to answer just because he asked. You're not required to open the door just because he knocked. And you're not required to lower your standards just because he finally decided to show up. Sometimes the best response is silence of your own. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is protect your peace by not letting him disturb it again. Because at the end of the day, when he reaches out after silence, the question isn't, what do I say? The real question is, has he earned the right to hear anything from me at all?